The rules are strict here. No alcohol and smoking only in the few designated areas. Long boots, helmets and protection glasses are a must all year round. Oil companies are promising more new oil fields in the tundra. With modern technology expanding beyond the Arctic Circle, the main concern will be not only to pump more barrels of oil, but at the same time to preserve the unique natural treasure.
The press conference was held on August 31st to celebrate first oil from the Ardalin field, developed for the first time in the Russian history by a Russian and American joint venture. Among those who spoke to the conference were the American ambassador, Mr. Pickering, and the Russian Minister of Fuel and Energy, Mr. Yuri Shafranik. After 2.5 years of development, the investments amounted up to $375 million. This project is a living evidence of successful investments in Russia for those who question. Also, creating the job opportunities provided for Russians was noted as an important part of the project. The project was discussed and approved by the government, representatives of both parties. It is projected that as a result of development operations in the PAL area, more than $1 billion will be added to federal and local budgets, including the Ness okrug. Two different economical systems have come together at one field beyond the polar circle. But the important thing is that we could find a joint target and work out approaches to achieve this target. As a result, we got all the necessary investments and could provide jobs for our employees and local workers. The Russia share in the project is about 70%.
Well, we don't know yet because we haven't.
We don't know yet how profitable this project is. In a great extent, it depends on oil prices and specific conditions. We think with the prices of about $17–20 per barrel, the project will be profitable.
то наш проект будет рентабельным.
The Ardalin field is located beyond the polar circle, about 1,600 kilometers northwest from Moscow. Environmental conditions here are unique because most of the territory is occupied by a virgin tundra. Protection of this environment is an important task of the company, and Conoco was committed to use ecologically safe technologies. Suffice it to say that all the facilities, including the pipeline, are for the first time in Russia constructed on pads of 2 to 3 meters high. In living modules like this one, provided by Americans to accommodate the oilers, a provision was made for everything, for work and recreation. The complex has a power generator, utilities, telecommunication system and other facilities to support year-round production from the Ardalin field. Looking at these facilities, it's hard to believe that they were built among Arctic tundra. Also, PAL Lights has been paying a lot of attention to the social infrastructure, creating a model island of success. The company's management is also interested in maximum use of local labor and raw materials. Next PAL Lights projects are aimed at development of new fields in the northern territories and require additional investments about $2 billion. At a press conference to celebrate first oil from the Ardalin field, the Russian Minister of Fuel and Energy said, "These and similar projects very well fit the events in the Russian oil and gas industry. The perestroika we started, and those approaches we are implementing to reorganize the oil and gas industry and integrate it into the international economical community."
Реформируя нефтегазовый комплекс и интегрируя его в мировое экономическое сообщество.
Cooperation with the Russian oil and gas complex is real and necessary. One who is going to cooperate with it will be a sure winner. Russian oil workers together with Americans started to develop one of the oil fields in the Donetsk Autonomous Okrug. First Arctic oil started flowing to Rusinsk, Yaroslavl, Belarus, Poland, and further to Germany through this 65-kilometer long pipeline in the Arctic region of the tundra. It is expected that black gold will be produced in this area during the next 20 years. Estimated reserves here are more than 16 million tons. It took only 2.5 years for Polar Light's company, founded by one of the largest world companies, Conoco, and Russian enterprise Arkhangelsk Geologia, to build this unique technological complex. 42 modules, almost waste-free and absolutely environmentally safe production, drilling rigs, living quarters and the pipeline itself are built on paths of 2 to 3 meters high to protect tundra's surface from thermal and mechanical impact, because it could take years to recultivate the soil. It is of interest to notice that we didn't see a traditional flare to burn associated gas which used to burn year after year across the tundra, disturbing ecological balance. JV Polar Lights project was approved by presidents of the United States and Russia. It is projected that the largest portion of revenues from production of oil and gas will stay in Russia. It's also expected that Americans will make a large contribution into regional infrastructure development.
News around the world and Houston. This is TV 51. KNWS TV, Katy, Houston.
After 2.5 years of development, the first joint Russian-American oil venture has begun production. Conoco announcing the first oil began flowing last week at the Polar Lights project, 1,000 miles northeast of Moscow. Conoco says this $375 million joint venture with Russia's Arkhangelsk Geologia is the single largest Western investment in Russia's petroleum history, creating nearly 200 Russian jobs.
Well, I think it opens the door. It's a great opportunity, not only for Conoco, but for the oil industry. I think we will be able to demonstrate the successful completion and development of a new oil field in Russia and show that it is possible, and hopefully that success will lead to others, not only for Conoco, but other companies as well.
We're told Polar Lights oil fields contain more than 130 million barrels of recoverable reserves.
From Pittsburgh Cable News Channel, the 10 o'clock news, the area's only live local newscast at 10. Anchored by David Johnson, John Fedko with First Sports, and Dennis Bowman's First Weather. Now, the 10 o'clock news with David Johnson. Local news, now.
American-based Conoco Oil Company begins pumping oil out of Russia. The company invested $400 million in a joint venture with a Russian oil company to export petroleum to the West. The partnership estimates there are 1 billion barrels of oil beneath the ice north of the Arctic Circle.
It's time for News 4, and you're with Colorado's News Channel. Reynalda Muse, Philip Palmer, and Marty Caniglio. Live on 4, this is News 4 at noon.
$400 million is being invested in the frozen tundra of Russia. Conoco has installed Polar Lights as part of a new joint venture that will pump and export petroleum to the West. The Russian firm and Conoco will begin pumping the oil this week.
Conoco of Houston goes Russian with the first Moscow-American partnership to develop a major new oil field. They call it the Polar Lights Project. It's in northern Russia, about 1,000 miles from Moscow. It's a 50-50 venture between Conoco and a Russian firm with an unpronounceable name. Geologists figure the field holds about 110 million barrels of recoverable oil.
A U.S. oil company is joining with a Russian one to form Polar Lights, a corporation that'll pump and export oil from a remote spot in Russia. ABC's Jennifer Glass has more.
The Russian Russian tundra is a vast, empty land. The ground is frozen solid most of the year. In the spring, which begins in May, the ground thaws and often stays soft and muddy and wet all summer. It has under the soil a permanent layer of frost. 12,000 feet under this particular piece of tundra, 1,000 miles north of Moscow, are 110 million barrels of oil. And here, buildings of red, yellow, and white color the bleak landscape. An American-Russian joint venture trying to bring the oil to the surface. Jennifer Glass, ABC News, on the Ardalin oil field, Russia.
Conoco announced in Moscow today that it has begun pumping oil from its Ardalin field in the north of the Arctic Circle, initiating the first Russian-American commercial venture there. But the company still faces an enormous obstacle before it can profit from the venture. It has to find a reliable way to transport the high-quality crude oil out to potential customers in Western Europe. The joint venture with the Russians, which is known as Polar Lights, took 5 years of negotiations and $390 million in startup costs. Executives of Polar Lights described it as the single largest investment from the West in Russia's petroleum sector. They said the high-tech toehold in the northern tundra was partly financed with $200 million in loans from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the International Finance Corporation, and the Overseas Private Investment Corporation. Polar Lights has based its first operations in the Ardalin oil field, a reservoir deep in the Timin-Pechora basin of northern Russia that geologists estimate contains 110 million barrels of recoverable oil. Because of the remote location, 1,000 miles northeast of Moscow, in the inhospitable conditions, the company must rely on a dizzying combination of oil swaps and pipeline guarantees to transport its crude. But politically and technically complicated deals are common for people in the oil industry, but they can be particularly arduous in Russia, where rules can change almost every day. Oil transport facilities are very limited, so Polar Lights might find itself having some problems, said Sergei Tumanov, a Moscow correspondent for Russian petroleum investor Petroleum Magazine.
After an investment of $375 million over 2.5 years, oil is finally beginning to flow from the first Russian-American joint venture. Houston-based Conoco and its Russian partner have drawn the first payoff from their Polar Lights project.
Certainly, there was a great deal of happiness that we've been able to bring this project online, on stream, and produce the first barrel of oil.
Conoco's Carlton Adams says that first barrel was drawn from the largest field in the Polar Lights venture in the Arctic tundra, about 1,000 miles northeast of Moscow.
The Polar Lights joint venture presented some problems. Drilling for anything in the Arctic tundra isn't easy. But Conoco's Director of Safety, Health, and Environmental Affairs, Jim Matheson, says the company got a lot of help from both the U.S. and Russian governments. Matheson expects the project to turn a profit now and down the road.
We are certainly expecting it to be a profitable venture, and at the same token, we are anticipating this to be the first of a long-term commitment to developing projects in Russia.
Polar Lights, a joint oil production project between Houston-based Conoco and a Russian company, has begun pumping oil from a field north of the Arctic Circle. Conoco's partner in the project is a Russian company that specializes in exploring for oil and gas in virgin tundra. The project is the first major new oil field located miles northeast of Moscow, first one to be developed by a Russian-American joint venture.
Oil is being pumped from a field north of the Arctic Circle in the first major new oil field venture between a Russian company and Houston-based Conoco Oil Incorporated, called Project Polar Lights. The pumping field is actually about 1,000 miles northeast of Moscow.